Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, and otherworldly and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow Creepin' It Real Show on Twitter at creepin_it. You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, creepinitrealshow.com. Without further ado, welcome to this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show. I am one of your hosts, Miss Moni, and I am here today with Yardley. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Look forward to today's episode.
Very nice. And Miss Christy, what's going on?
Hey, not much. Crazy town, crazy life, but happy to be here. And this is a wonderful outlet, as always, and excited to talk about one of my faves, Stephen King.
For sure. And real quick, I just wanted to say a couple things that I haven't been able to share prior to today, is one of them being I will be presenting at New York Comic Con. So I've been invited to be a panelist there to talk about the subject of graphic novels.
Awesome.
And speaking of graphic novels, yeah, I'm super excited. Taking this to the East Coast, making it legit.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, graphic novel world, San Diego did something landmark, and it was surprising because it was KPBS, which, you know, PBS, public broadcasting, is usually for an older, more white person demographic, but they did something really exciting this year, which is we have a community-wide read for the whole county every year called One Book, One San Diego, and usually they pick kind of hoity-toity white authors, quite frankly. And this year they actually not only picked a graphic novel for the first time ever, which is March, but it's by civil rights activist and Congressman John Lewis. So
Really?
super duper exciting, and people are actually, it's being well received. People, because we were kind of worried how it would go over, because I'm part of the committee that helped get this done. And we were pleasantly surprised at how well the KPBS audience took it yesterday at Festival of the Books. So I highly, and I know it's not creepy at all, but I highly recommend, if you're going to read anything, or if you're going to read any graphic novel in your whole life, read March by John Lewis, because just, I mean, bring your tissues. It's going to make you cry, but all 3 volumes are just mesmerizingly beautiful pieces of history and art. So
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and also of note, and I can speak to this because I used to keep like a part-time job at a bookstore, but that graphic novel was definitely killing it here in Atlanta because John Lewis frequents the
He's our man.
Buckhead. Yeah, the Buckhead Barnes and Nobles a
Yeah.
lot. I actually got some pictures. When I saw that you put that in there, I was trying to find some pictures of me and John Lewis. But yeah, the graphic novels are good. And yeah, it's definitely made an impact down here. So yeah, I definitely
Exciting.
recommend that as well.
I'm glad we're adopting it over here. And I actually am going to get to meet him at a VIP meet and greet event next month. And I am just like dying. I'm so excited. He's just so inspirational. And he's actually writing a new one. I don't know if you guys have heard. It got delayed, unfortunately, because they're trying to plan it around his breaks in Congress. But he's got a new one that's going to be coming out now in 2019 called Run, about his actual run for Congress. So that's super exciting.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, speaking of awesome, not nearly as awesome, but still super funny. Christy, weird news about a security guard and farts.
Yeah, really quick before I start that, I also forgot. Y'all are going to get a 2 for this week. Last week I couldn't post the podcast. It was crazy. I thought I was going to get to it Friday or Saturday, a day or 2 late. Ended up with a migraine and was just like, I can't do it. So y'all are going to get a 2 for 1 this week. Stephen
Woohoo.
King and Roswell Alien. So congratulations. Bonus
Twice
time.
as nice.
Yeah, so I watched this video and I laughed until I had tears. So this guy has named himself Paul Flart, and he has been fired.
Fart cop.
Yeah, he has been fired from a hospital in Florida where he was a security guard. So he's now become a viral internet star because I'm not sure how many posts he's got, but he's got 374,000 views, and this was days ago. This was the 23rd, so we're still 3 more days in. Views of him farting in the hospital desk that he was sitting at. So,
as you do.
If you can hear, here's a few. I don't know if can y'all hear that?
Oh yeah, we can hear it. It sounds like literal breaking of wind.
Yeah.
There's so his facial expressions while he's doing this are just what kills it. It's
I love his hair, by the way. Is that real hair?
I don't know if it looks like a wig. He says it transcends all languages. There's no translation necessary. It's just funny. For those who can tolerate the nearly 2-minute saga of sphincter sirens, it's hard not to start analyzing the different aspects of Flart's gaseous oral output. They range from short and flat zaps like snare drums to long, sonorous anal bellows. Oh, it's like listening to a romantic audiobook narrated by Terrence and Phillip, one commenter wrote.
Oh, God.
So apparently he was going viral on the internet due to a dude website picking it up and posting it. And then his job caught wind, pun intended, that he was violating their cell phone
policies
rule. You can't be on your cell phone. And in his photos, you can see the uniform, which apparently is a no-no.
Whoops. Yeah.
So he got busted. He recorded being fired. They were trying to get him to turn off the recording, and he wouldn't do it. And then they tried to get him to sign some document, and he wouldn't do that anyway, and he just walked away. So now he's ready to take his farting on the road. And is going to do some vacation farting, and he also has a Patreon set up. So I'll be interested to see how long his 15 minutes last.
Yardley, is he the least or the most hireable person now?
You know what? The funny thing about it is, even though things go viral, still the overwhelming majority of people don't know about this dude. So I think he'll be able to find another job. Probably. But it's definitely funny. And actually, his hair reminds me of that guy in Deadpool. You know, the one the guy who didn't have any powers.
Yeah.
That dude, it kind of reminds me of that. But, well, if we're talking about strange things that people are doing, I have a little weird news. Ripley's Believe It or Not is going to turn 100 in December. And that is such a trip because I grew up watching the TV series. I think, it was in the 80s, and it was pretty cool. You know, that was definitely an outlet where I learned about a lot of things that some would deem strange from all over the world. So what they're going to do, and it actually happened on August the 24th, they released their 15th book. It's A Century of Strange. I'm going to read the press release really quickly. Releasing just in time for the 100th anniversary of Ripley's Believe It or Not, A Century of Strange, the 15th book in the best-selling series. It's packed with all the unexpected stories and images you've come to expect from Ripley's. There's simply no way to prepare yourself for this all-true, all-new collection filled with incredible facts, unbelievable stories, and mind-blowing photography. As amazing today as 100 years ago. A Century of Strange. So I think that that's cool. And I know if anybody has to be familiar with a lot of these books, it has to be Moni, because if these are in the library, it's a travesty.
I was actually going to mention, we cannot keep these books on the shelf. Parents, if you're looking for something to get your kid reading, someone who maybe doesn't like to read, these Believe It or Not books are bound in usually like a sparkly or like reflective cover, so they look really cool. And then you pull them off the shelf, and of course they're full of strange facts, but they're illustrated. And kids, like grade school age kids, just adore them. We cannot like keep them in stock in the library at all.
Yeah, and you know, I think all of us were you ever interested in the Ripley's TV series? Was it ever in syndication, Moni? Did you ever catch it? Or
I've seen a few episodes, and I always find that kind of stuff interesting, but I haven't watched it. I didn't grow up watching it, kind of the way you guys are mentioning.
Who was the guy that was the host? Is he on like Fantasy Island or something? I can't remember the guy, but his voice I can hear in my head right now.
I think it's a Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah. Oh man, I love those shows. He did.
Oh, he died.
Man.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I was fascinated with the books, with the shows. I loved it. I went to the museum in LA and it was okay. Could be better. It was the books. I'm like, it was like basically walking into the book. It wasn't.
I'm dead wrong. It was not Ricardo.
Who is it?
Although I'm looking it up now. I just got like an image in my head. I'm like, I'm totally wrong, because wasn't it like the British guy or something like that?
I can't remember.
Let me look it up. I mean, I've got the link here, so just keep talking and I'll find it.
Talk amongst yourselves. I just hear lifestyles of the rich and famous instead of like, because I don't know. Exactly. But that's what I hear in my head is like the fabulous Ripley's Believe It or Not.
I know, like Dean Cain was after a certain time, but not the very first one is the one that I'm trying to think of.
Dean Cain, by the way, where has he been? Because he's delicious. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, Jack Palance was one of the, apparently, let's see here. I'm looking it up, and it says like Dean Cain, Jack Palance, and Marie Osmond was a co-host. Like in
Marie Osmond, no.
That's weird. It doesn't say who else. I see what you're saying.
It was Jack. The one I'm thinking of is Jack Palance.
Yeah, Jack Palance.
I remember his voice. That's like all I can think of. Oh, he was the guy from City Slickers.
Yeah,
the old guy. Yeah.
And remember, there was, man, he was actually been in a few things, but it's just kind of funny because I know I'm probably going to get roasted for saying Ricardo Montalban. What's the guy? But the reason why I'm thinking about him is there was some other news. But Ripley's it's pretty cool. And as Moni said, if you're just looking for something, it's easy to get sucked into those books. They're easy reads, and there's always going to be something that you didn't know about in them. So I definitely co-sign those books. And Ripley's has been around for a long time. I think more than anything, they're finding a way to stay relevant, and I think that's a good thing.
You know what also was great about those books, because I bought my son them, and he was one of those people that did not want to read. And it really does help also facilitate like conversation, because he'll come down and be like, did you know? Like he like fills his head full of all these, crazy facts, and then comes down and like quizzes us. Well, who do you think had the largest this or what? So it's just funny that that it helps you have conversations, and your kid wants to come talk to you and quiz you about his newly found knowledge of crazy things, and so that's another great aspect of it.
Well, did either of you kind of scroll down the article? It just gives you some examples of the types of pictures that are in the books. But the funny thing is when you're scrolling down it, of course, the serial killer in a jar, that's always going to be a winner to make people, look at. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically in Portugal, they executed this guy, and his head is in a jar to this day, and it looks, the preservation is outstanding. And also the fruit bat stew. That's what I wanted to focus in on. The bat still has its erection. It's in that picture. Yeah, it's. I'm like, maybe, because not only do you have to like get through the hair and all of that stuff, it's the erection would have just made me not want to eat it. But I had to point that out before we move on.
I thought you were going to say the fingernail guy was in there.
No, I mean, once you look at that picture, you can't stop seeing it.
Yeah, I see it now. I didn't notice
I'm going to see that in my dreams, so thanks.
Yeah, I didn't notice it until you pointed it out.
Oh, and the 140-pound cyst. Oh, good things. Oh, okay. And we're done. So, well, I kind of like this. We're very literary today, which, of course, as a librarian, I enjoy. But we're going to talk about the movie 1922, which is based on an adaptation. It's an adaptation of the Stephen King novella of the same title out of the book of collected short stories, Full Dark, No Stars. But the actual story is called 1922. And it's on Netflix right now, starring Thomas Jane and a couple other people you'll recognize. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes here. But what I really wanted to talk about was and a lot of people know about this, but it's still kind of interesting because now, of course, it being more popular, and now you have Gerald's Game on Netflix within the last 6 months, and 1922. There's a lot. Castle Rock is available on Hulu right now. Have either of you been watching Castle Rock, by the way?
I have not.
No, I hate to say this. I love Stephen King. He's the executive producer on the show, and it stars the Skarsgård that plays Pennywise.
Oh, Bill.
So, and he's playing a creepy role again. So that's kind of interesting. But I've watched 6 out of 7 episodes. I keep wanting to like it. It's very well done. If you're looking for something truly scary or spooky, and that's kind of how it was advertised, I think that's more what it is the marketing kind of said this was going to be a scary show, and it's not. It's not scary at all. It's filled with mystery. It's filled with great acting. I kind of feel like, my husband hit the nail on the head last night. There's almost too many mysteries. You feel like you're on season 5 instead of season 1, and like you stop caring because there's just so much going on. And yet it's a very slow burn. But anyway, skipping Castle Rock, but to talk about how things are connected, because Castle Rock, of course, Shawshank Prison comes into play in that television show, and they work with a lot of the same actors, like I mentioned, the Skarsgårds and all that. So a lot of things in Stephen King's world are connected, whether it's the actors, whether it's the settings in the book, or whether it's the actual characters in his stories. So Yardley, tell us how everything is connected to the Dark Tower.
All right, well, this one seems pretty apparent for anybody who's ever read even little parts of King's magnum opus, the 7-book, the Dark Tower series. Have y'all read all 7 books of the Dark Tower series?
I haven't read all 7. I read the first one that's in a graphic novel form, so of course I had to read it that way, but I have not finished. So.
There was one, actually, before I move on, I think the very first one, I think when they reprinted it, Stephen King basically printed like an apology at the beginning of the book saying that it basically wasn't that good. Have you seen that, Moni?
No, that's really?
There was one where he was like, I think that he didn't believe that it came out the way that he wanted. But of course, things, I guess, kind of righted themselves later on. But anyway, that's interesting.
I have not read this one. I love Stephen King. Some of his things, actually some of my very favorite books, it took months to get me to get into it. Like I'd read a little bit and put it down, read a little bit and put it down, because he has so much like front storytelling in these long novels. But this one, when I read the descriptions of it, I'm like, this does not interest me at all. So I kind of know, I'm not that hardcore where I'll read every single thing he puts out. But there are, like, the first book I ever read of his was The Stand, and I was in middle school. And it took me like 6 months to read it because of the front end of it is so long and drawn out. But His Son's
that way too. All the Joe Hill books are super long and drawn out, but the ideas are there and it's well written.
Brilliant.
So.
I mean, like literally sitting down and putting together a story like that, as long as these books are, it's just brilliance. I mean,
100%,
my rudimentary, brain has a hard time processing it all, so it takes a while. But everybody encouraged me to keep going, and they were right. It was my favorite book of all time. But this one, I wouldn't. I read the description and I was like, Meh. I mean, it might be great. I just wasn't a fan.
Well, for those who don't know, the series follows a nomadic gunslinger named Roland as he attempts to reach the Dark Tower and destroy the Crimson King. Along the way, he encounters people who pop up in various other King stories, most notably the villainous Randall Flagg, who is basically the right-hand man of the Crimson King. Flagg, of course, is also antagonist in The Stand.
The world of it is connected to the Dark Tower too, but Flagg isn't the only villain from King Universe to pop up in the Dark Tower series. One of the most famous villains King has ever created is Pennywise, the titular clown from the book It. Late in the Dark Tower series, Roland encounters a dangerous creature named Dandolo. Dandolo is the servant of the Crimson King, and when killed, he turns into a clown. Basically, Dandolo is believed to be Pennywise himself, meaning that he and Flagg serve the same master. That's fascinating.
And then It is also directly connected to The Shining. At this point, more people no doubt know The Shining more as that movie starring crazy Jack Nicholson along with the kid that went around saying red rum. But remember the old caretaker in The Shining, the one who recognized the power that little Danny, a.k.a. the Red Rum Kid, possessed? His name was Dick Hallorann, and believe it or not, he was also in the book It. Or he was referenced in the book. It turns out that the father of one of the kids from It served with Hallorann, bringing the connection from It all the way back to the Dark Tower.
And Misery is also connected to it. As it turns out, it has a ton of connections to other worlds within the Stephen King universe as well. One you probably won't believe is The World of Misery, which is best known at this point as the movie where Kathy Bates breaks James Caan's legs. Oh, his ankles, that's right, with that sledgehammer. You know, that was a movie that when it came out, I watched it. It's a watch once, but you don't really go back to revisit it movie.
Yeah.
You know, it always sticks with you. But in that story, the protagonist is Paul Sheldon, who turns out is from the same town as the kids from It. In fact, it's revealed that he was the next door neighbor to one of them. Now that one is doomed, little town. I mean, that town, what is it, Derry? What was it called? Made up Derry?
Yeah, Derry.
Yeah, so that's a doomed town for the most part. That pretty much sucks. So if you were curious, of course, go to Indiana.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, because once I read The Stand, that was game on. I read them all. I read It and Salem's Lot and and I remember looking on a map going, where the hell is Derry? Like, I was fascinated with that. And Derry is also home to the alien invasion in Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher is another one of those stories you'll probably remember more for its movie adaptation than the actual story, even though in this case it's remembering how god-awful the movie turned out, really. Anyway, in that story, 4 friends were granted certain psychic powers as kids, as is common theme in King stories. And when they grow up, they need to try to use their psychic connection to defeat an alien invader, which, yes, takes place in the town of Derry. Derry is a setting in one of King's more recent stories as well, one that's called 11/22/63. Damn, I loved that book. That was so good. That was a good one.
I need to check that one out.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's fantastic.
I was muting because it never fucking fails, you guys. As soon as we start recording, somebody's got to start mowing their lawn. Like, nobody does that up until at any rate. 11/22/63 is also connected to Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. In the story of 11/22/63, which I need to read, is that of a young English teacher in Maine is shown a doorway to the past, which will allow him to go back to 1958 and live for 5 years in that era in order to travel to Dallas, Texas to thwart Lee Harvey Oswald's attempt to assassinate John F. Kennedy. However, in order to make sure that stopping Oswald will in fact change things for the better, the teacher does a test run by stopping another smaller atrocity, which is a horrific murder in the, wait for it, town of Derry. By the way, it's mentioned several times that criminals in 1958 in Derry were terrified of winding up in Shawshank Prison. That means that amazingly, Shawshank Redemption is connected to the Dark Tower.
The Dark Tower also has a direct connection to Hearts in Atlantis and Salem's Lot. So late in the Dark Tower series, some very familiar characters are introduced to become allies to Roland and his group, or Quartet if you want to use King's favorite made-up language. One of them is Father Callahan, the preacher from Salem's Lot. In fact, a big chunk of Book 5 of the Dark Tower is told in flashback by Callahan as he goes over some of the run-ins he had with vampires over the years. Another character who's become central is Ted Brodigan, who was central to one of those stories in Hearts in Atlantis.
And finally, a secret organization is responsible for everything. Throughout the Stephen King universe, a shadowy organization known as The Shop is mentioned and appears to be behind the scenes, pulling strings and screwing around with horrible experiments that always end in disaster. One such experiment is that they give the titular, that's the second time I've had to say this word, I can't say it. The titular character in Firestarter, her powers, and oh, that was another good book. And another one was that they become involved in an operation called the Arrowhead Project. The Arrowhead Project is responsible for creating the rip in reality that allows the monsters to enter in and terrorize the world in the mist.
Oh my God, the Mist is so good too.
That's where, what's his name? That's how I recognized him on the...
Thomas Jane?
Yeah, Thomas Jane. I was like, oh my God,
Stephen King likes to work with the same actors a lot, which is kind of cool.
And he was so good. And he was so good that it took me almost the entire movie to figure out who the heck he was. The rip in reality, by the way, would appear to be a thinny, which is a spot in the world where the boundary between one world and another is weak and could easily be punctured. You know what other work by King has thinnies? You guessed it, The Dark Tower. Yet more evidence that in King's universe, literally everything is connected.
So that article comes to us from Weird Worm, just to cite it since we were reading it basically verbatim. And I wanted to ask you guys, though, do you like it when authors or TV shows or movies, when they do this kind of connecting, or do you think all the Easter eggs get kind of annoying and distracting, kind of like the Marvel Universe or something like that? Do you guys like that?
Well, for me, even when you're talking about Easter eggs, I don't know if I'll call them distracting, because the average person who watches it and isn't looking for them is, it's not going to really matter to them. I don't mind it, but I would rather have an Easter egg that's going to pay off later. So for me, if I'm, it's interesting because we all know the movies are shot a different way, sometimes from the books, sometimes they stay kind of close and whatnot. But I don't think it's as obvious to a person. Like if you were someone who just watched the movies, I don't think that you would connect it. But if you read it, these are a lot of books, y'all. Like I don't mind it if there's a payoff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like a lot of Stephen King's books, they're all kind of different. So I don't know, how many books does he have? Like, doesn't he have like, I don't know, probably like 50 books or more or something? It's crazy. Yeah. So I love it, but there has to be a payoff.
I love it. I love that. I consider that they're connected as my payoff, I guess, because every single story is so different. There's no, you can't read one of his books and go, oh, this is just like blah, blah, blah. They're all completely different in anything from aliens to crazies to, you just can't, like the Langoliers, that one was really crazy. Tommyknockers, they're all so different. So to know that they're so different yet connected, to me, it makes me want to go and read them all over again.
Well, what has Stephen King commented or confirmed like that was all on purpose or anything like that? Or is this just something that fans have kind of put together and put out there?
Well, that's what I realized was that, it could be not on purpose, but I feel like I haven't seen anything, but I feel like at this point it would have to be, right? You can't keep writing Derry or Shawshank or, into different stories if you're not trying to connect them at least to some extent.
Yeah.
I think he just wants to connect them just enough. Nothing that like, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe in a few years he's going to release a book and like all the characters come together and it's like freaking Avengers or something. But I think in his mind, for his real fans, the people that really pay attention, like this guy clearly does, it's payoff enough to know that there's one little instance right there that flashes back to another part of his world,
Yeah. Well, and that's what people were asking actually regarding Castle Rock, since it's such a slow burn, was Bill Skarsgård, since again he plays Pennywise in the It movie, was it going to be connected like they're at Shawshank, and is he going to turn into, because basically the running theme in Castle Rock is you don't know what Bill Skarsgård character, they just call him the kid, what he is, because he hasn't aged in 30 years and bad things happen around him. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, are you the devil? Like, what are you? But in the meantime, people are wondering if he evolves and becomes Pennywise at some point. But that I did see that Stephen King came out and said, no, they just like working with some of the same actors who they know can pull off certain roles, not that this is ever going to be connected to it that directly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm just trying to scroll down his tweeter, as I like to call it. I don't see anything like him addressing any of this, but
no.
He has a lot of he tweets a lot. So
yes,
and he's very political.
I'm looking for articles, but he also does a lot of articles. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, so not seeing much of anything, but he is a big fan of Maine and all the up north states, and I can see that because he still talks about he's talking about Maine, he's talking about just random stuff. So I personally, I consider him probably up there with like a lot of literary geniuses. I mean, he's just, his stories, like, to have his mind is, I just always growing up thinking, how in the fuck did you come up with this? That's crazy.
Some of the stuff he writes isn't even horror, and it's just, it's like inspirational or like spiritual kind of, and it's beautiful. And he talks about, you know, he's taught little classes or written little books on the art of writing, you know, as a craft. He's fucking brilliant.
I don't know how, I think you're born with his brain. I don't know how you develop that, because I could do maybe a book or two, but holy shit. I mean, how he develops his stories is just I'm not even worthy. Like I couldn't even imagine. He really is fantastic.
Absolutely. So speaking of things that I enjoyed, hopefully, I don't know about fantastic, but 1922, this dark little story from Stephen King. Again, I mentioned that it is available on Netflix if anybody wants to watch along with us. The plot is Wilfred James, played by Thomas Jane, as we mentioned. It starts with him in a hotel writing his confession about a crime he committed in 1922. In 1922, he's a farmer living in Nebraska in the middle of nowhere with his wife, Arlette, and 14-year-old son, Henry. Wilf and Arlette have been arguing because Arlette has inherited 100 acres of land, and Wilf is thinking that on top of his 80 acres, it would make a nice, beautiful farmland, whereas Arlette wants to sell it and move to Omaha and open a dress shop and be a city person. And son Henry and Wilf are very vehemently against becoming city people, but the bottom line is that Wilf doesn't have much of a leg to stand on because he's not making any money with his own farm, therefore can't buy his wife out, etc. So they discuss divorce, and Arlette is adamant that Henry's going to be coming with her, that she's going to take their son. So Wilf decides, and he talks about both in the book and in the movie, but it's more fleshed out in the book, that he has a conniving man that lives inside of him that starts whispering in his ear, like, you don't need to get a divorce. You don't need to do any of these things. What you need to do not only is kill Arlette to, you know, inherit her land, but also you need to convince your son Henry to help. And we can argue the points of this, but I kind of feel like, obviously, the murder part's bad enough, but she did have him over a barrel. But convincing your 14-year-old son to help was really, I feel like, the real downfall. What do you guys think? Was that like over the edge, above and beyond the murder itself?
Absolutely. But I think, you know, I thought that the movie was pretty solid, you know, but for me, I think it suffered from not being long enough, because I don't think that they focused enough on the son particularly being conflicted about what's going on, because I didn't get to see enough go on in this movie to make me think that the son would have kind of eased in on the plan like that, be that gullible. But yeah.
In the book, they set it up basically that the son is very religious, and the mother, Arlette, on the surface seems to be. However, eventually, well, at one point she slaps Henry for saying like that, I'm not going to go with you. You know, I'm not going to help you sell this farm and go with you. So Wilf mentions that was the moment that the conniving man inside of him realized that Arlette had helped seal her own fate. But still, Henry is not on board with killing Mom until Wilf convinces Henry that it's going to be a painless, quick death, and B, one night, Wilf knows that Arlette likes to drink, and so he usually keeps her to one glass of wine so she doesn't kind of lose her shit, but he gives her multiple intentionally. So what he does is he goes out, as a conniving man will, and lies to his wife and tells her, I've had a change of heart, I don't want a divorce, and in fact, I want to move with you. I want to sell this land. You know, she's already been talking to a land development company. She's already been consulting with a lawyer. I want to sell this land to the company you want to sell it to for top dollar, and I want to move with you and have a dress shop and maintain our family. So she's like, woohoo, let's celebrate. So she starts drinking, which is something that very pious up to this point son Henry does not like. And then she gets drunk and starts being real nasty. And they showed a little bit of it in the movie, but the book, they did more justice to loudmouth Arlette out on the porch, sloppy ass drunk, smells like a wine cellar, and she's talking to Henry about his girlfriend Shannon and saying that, have you touched her titties yet? Like, oh, you're slow. My son is behind. Have you touched her here? And she's like circling her own lady parts, which is like, yeah, as a mom to your child, to your son, like, ew. Yeah. So she's just sloppy drunk and being disgusting and saying things that are real disrespectful to Henry about his, little, for love of his life, that age, 14-year-old, to his little Shannon. And so he goes up to his dad and is like, as long as it's going to be painless, let's do this. So one night, after she's passed out drunk, they go into her room and they cover up her face and they cut her throat with a butcher knife. But unfortunately for them, it doesn't kill her right away. So she fights, and they do, again, a better job with the detail in the book where she ends up getting cut like the fucking Joker. Like, they cut her face so that she has a creepy smile, like almost all the way to her ear. She goes to put her hand up to protect herself. They cut her hand. They cut her throat a second time. There's blood everywhere. This has definitely not been quick, not been painless, not gone the way they planned. Poor Henry passes out looking at his mom like that. He passes out twice, once during when they're actually still killing her, and once as they're taking her out to throw her in the bottom of a well, where, of course, her body sits up straight, the blanket falls off of it, and you can see her abnormally large smile on her face being slashed as she's laying down there, beginning to slowly, this is a pivotal point, to slowly be eaten by rats. Yeah. So what did you think about the murder scene in the movie?
That rat crawling out of her mouth. Oh my God. I watched it this morning and Rick's like, what a great movie to wake up to. I'm like, yeah, that's gross. Oh man. Oh, it's nasty.
They definitely get props from me from doing the makeup, because that was so creepy. And what is it? What do they call it? The accusatory eyes thing, where it's looking right up. It was like, oh man. See, those are the things that were kind of missing from the movie. Just all of the stuff that would make you kind of believe that the kid would jump on board. But if you're just watching the show, I was like, damn, I kind of felt sorry for her. I was oh my gosh, that was over the top. And then on top of that, to get a cow thrown on top of you.
Yes. Yeah. So they try to cover the crime by putting a fucking cow into the well with her, because I guess they have to account for the fact that the well has been recently messed with, the fact that there's dead body smell, the fact that there's rats. So they have to lose a cow. So, I mean, this is getting more expensive too, if you think about it. And in the meantime, of course, the sheriff comes a-calling because wife has been missing for a bit, and they have packed her things and made it look like she ran away. And of course, they had to deal with cleaning the blood, and Henry had to be part of cleaning his mother's blood up all over the damn house. So he starts to become more brooding, more isolated. He's, again, very religious, so he's really feeling what they've done is wrong. And his girlfriend becomes increasingly concerned with him, his little 14-year-old sweet little Shannon girlfriend, and he's regretting this crime, but of course he doesn't tell her. And you find out that she is several months pregnant, which is exactly what his mother had been joking around about, like, don't be poking her here, she's going to get pregnant, and that's how your daddy and mama ended up together, and we're not even happy, and all this stuff. So her parents have a little more money than Wilf and his family, so they're like, we're going to send her to an institution. We're going to have her, give up the baby for adoption. And instead, Henry's like, no, this is not going to happen, steals Wilf's car and goes and runs away with Shannon. So meanwhile, Wilf is in the house and he's becoming increasingly isolated. It's, they don't have electricity in the house. It's freezing. He's starting to, I'd like to ask you guys, he's starting to see things now. I mean, the rats really are a real thing, and he gets bitten on his hand, bitten by the mouth of a rat on his hand, gets infected, starts seeing the apparition of his dead wife. Do you think something supernatural at this point is at play, or do you think that he's losing his shit, or both?
Losing his shit for me. I totally think that that's the case, even though from what I read, a few articles on the book, is I guess it's left kind of ambiguous or something in the book where they actually put enough evidence out there where you think it could be real. I think it was in his head. You have to think about that's just this guy's journey into madness. It almost seems like that's punishment enough. You almost don't want him to check out. Yeah. Because you want him to keep on having to bear that weight of that bad decision. So.
Oh, it gets so much worse. Christy, do you think that he was crazy or?
I want to believe that it was her. But I mean, they did provide all the evidence that he's losing his shit. Except for the part where he says that she whispers in his ear everything that he's doing, and he says only a dead person would know.
Yes.
And so she's telling him what his son has run off with the girl, and she's telling him what is happening. And I'll know you'll get to that, but that's where I was kind of like, like that's you're losing your shit, and you can see her all day, but you don't necessarily know what your son's up to on the other side of the world either. So I'd like to believe that that's her coming back, exacting her revenge and fucking with him.
Yeah, and I wondered about that too, because I thought about that, and that was, wow, that scene actually almost gave me goosebumps, and I don't get freaked out that easily, but that was pretty cool, where she's whispering, you see the dead Arlette like crawling her way up to him and leaning up and putting her mouth in his ear. Yeah, oh my God. And whispering things that only a dead woman would know. And at first you think that because, like, how would he learn of these things? But then you see that it's almost done in like a montage-y type of way where you're seeing Shannon and Henry basically become the sweetheart bandits, kind of a Bonnie and Clyde or something of that nature, where she's pregnant, they need money, they're on the run, they're only 14. And so they are knocking over banks and basically stealing and robbing and doing what they need to get money to survive. And while they're on the run, this is what Arlette is telling them, the sweetheart bandits make national news and they're in the newspaper. So I'm wondering, I mean, Wilf is a shit kicker. We don't know if he has access to the newspaper or any of that, but, he could definitely be finding out either from newspapers himself or from neighbors telling him, or even the sheriff telling him what's been going on. But the way that they do it is they show his dead wife whispering these things in his ear. And basically, during one of the heists, it goes bad and Henry shoots at someone and starts running away. And the person shoots back and hits Shannon right in the abdomen. And it's, again, the middle of winter, very cold. They're hiding out in some abandoned house, and she ends up dying from bleeding out in her stomach. She loses the baby, she dies. And so Henry lies down next to her, and he kills himself with a handgun that he used to rob his own victims. So Wilf, by this point, his hand is severely infected from the rat bite, and he's been amputated, and he's in the hospital. And this was kind of interesting. They kind of gloss over it in this Wikipedia description that I'm reading, but I just wanted to go, of course, part of the story has been avoiding detection by the sheriff, who's like, oh, she ran away. Oh, okay. Like, where's her stuff and all this kind of thing. So Wilf's in the hospital, and we see the sheriff come to visit him, and the sheriff says, we found a body. And the way that he says it, Wilfred turns his head away and kind of does like a choked back sob. And you don't know if for a minute you think the sheriff maybe knows what happened, that they found the body in the well. Did you guys get that impression? Did you think that he was caught right then?
Yeah, I did.
And I think he thinks that he's caught, so he sort of like doesn't say anything. Luckily for him, he doesn't say, oh my God, I did it, I'm sorry, because he keeps quiet for just long enough for the sheriff to continue with his story of, we found the body on the road. Was she missing her 2 back teeth? And then he's like, yeah, that. Now, I'm also curious, had he just ended up having to confess / getting caught right in that moment, do you think all of this that has been set into motion, all the bad things that are happening in his life, do you think he would have at least, gone to jail and that would have been the end of it? Or do you think that this curse or whatever happened would have continued on?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it can, even confessing doesn't bring closure. It might help you out a little bit conscience-wise, because at this point you think you need to pay a penance for what happened. But I don't know. I think that something like that would stick with you.
Yeah.
I thought for a second there, I thought he was going to confess. because just the way he was looking, it was almost like I thought, oh, he's going to confess, because I didn't know the story.
Maybe he wanted to finally get it off his chest, but then he gets another out, and that fucker, he takes it.
Yep.
So he's like, yeah, those were her teeth. That must have been my wife's body that you found.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes out of the hospital minus one hand. He's losing his land anyway because there's no money, and the property management company that had originally wanted to buy it from his wife, in particular, we find that Wilf really, not only does he not want to sell, but he really does not want to sell to this company. And I think it's for the same reason that a lot of people feel like there's a Starbucks on every corner, or there's a McDonald's or whatever. He doesn't want this beautiful farmland that he's in love with to turn into something more commercial. So he, first of all, has to go to the morgue and identify what's left of his son, which of course has been eaten by a rat on the face, and as well as having had his, brains blown out from shooting himself. So that's a pretty creepy, gross moment where they uncover, and Wilf is like sobbing because he just saw his son like that. Oh my God. What did you guys think? Did you like the makeup on that part?
Outstanding. He looked like one of those living dead dolls.
He looked like the boy. He looked like the boy in that part.
14-year-old son turns into some rat-eaten thing. Oh my God!
Doll, he looked like that creepy ass doll in The Boy, and that had also been eaten by rats. I was shocked when they showed that. I was like, "Whoa!" I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I actually paused and kind of looked at it. Once again, they get a lot of props for their practical makeup, because that just looked pretty brutal. And the same thing, that one accusatory eye just it's wide open.
And that's props to Netflix. That's a Netflix original movie, and they do some good shit over there. So Wilf wanders over to Shannon's parents, who I mentioned before have a little more money and have been partners and neighbors with Wilf for many years. And they're not so favorable to Wilf, having had his son knock up their daughter, steal their daughter, and ultimately be responsible for getting their daughter killed. So he's trying to sell the land to Shannon's dad. And God, I feel so bad for this family, because not only have they lost a daughter, which is beyond bad enough, they haven't done anything. They had no part in this murder. All they did was have a sweet daughter that fell in love with their silly little son. And in the end, you find out that they're also losing their farm, that there's no money left after all that has come upon them. And rightfully, I think Shannon's dad tells, played by Neil McDonough, by the way, who's in everything. I was like, hey, it's that guy again. Mm-hmm. But he tells Wilf to leave my property and never come back. Did you feel like he was right in saying that?
Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't kick his ass.
I know. I was like, I would have started shooting on sight, I swear. So Wilf, ironically, loses the farm to the company that he was the last place he wanted to sell it to, moves to fucking Omaha, has very little money, had to sell the farm for, quote, a ridiculously low price after all that has come upon it. It wasn't worth nearly as much anymore. Still has to move to Omaha, where he was trying to avoid going, and drinks his money away within 2 years' time. So within 8 years, so he tried to get a job and kind of felt like the rats were following him everywhere. Do you think that was mental illness, or do you think that was really happening?
I think it was really happening, but it was more in his head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not so, rats being around, especially in the places that he were in that time, I don't think it's something that, that you wouldn't see. So, but I think that any time that he might have saw a rat, it probably triggered some type of attack, though.
Yeah.
I agree.
So he drinks himself through the money. He tries working for a few years, but keeps having to leave due to rat infestation. I hate it when that happens. Mm-hmm. And so here we are at the way that this film and the book were framed was he's actually telling this story as he's writing it out with his one hand from this hotel room where we're seeing rats coming out of the wall. And again, not 100% positive that that's really happening. This really reminded me of the Telltale Heart, the Poe book or story, because he's having the guilt of what he's done is coming manifesting in his mind and coming through the walls and all that kind of stuff. So haven't read that story in years, but I was like, this is so Telltale Heart right now with, hearing stuff in the walls and thinking about confessing to what you've done and having it drive you mad. So he says, in the end, we all get caught, and now dozens of rats have swarmed into his room. Now, this is different from the book, but in the movie, Arlette, Henry, and Shannon's corpses, which are all just disgusting from being rat infested and their various injuries, appear in front of a terrified Wolf, and Henry is brandishing the same butcher knife used to kill his mother. And Henry, just like Wilf had said about Arlette, that it would be a quick, painless death, Henry says, don't worry, it will be quick. So did you guys like this ending?
It was all right. I mean, it was okay.
I liked the movie ending. I think the book ending would have been better, but yeah, I mean, they were both, I think, for the movie, I don't know why they decide to change things like that. I can't, there must have been some reason behind it, but I mean, when I've never read the book, so I didn't know until you wrote down, typed it out, that it's a little bit more descriptive about what's going on, whereas the movie is mainly just kind of hints towards what's happening,
Yeah, they left it. I mean, like if you watch the movie, you know how we were saying, do we think that was really happening or not? The movie actually makes you think that, maybe they really were there and they were taking vengeance out on him. But, but I don't know. I just kind of like the way that, I don't know. I guess for TV, you could do that and it works, but I really would have liked them to kind of tweak it a little bit more towards what King wrote.
Well, yeah. So what King wrote is Wilfred sits in his hotel room in Omaha writing down the story and claiming that Arlette, Henry, and Shannon, along with the rats, are present while he's writing this. Wilfred plans to commit suicide before the rats consume him, but apparently misplaces his gun. The story ends with a newspaper clipping about Wilfred's death stating that he was found with bite marks that appear to be self-inflicted. This leaves the reader to speculate about whether Wilf's accounts were true or delusional. Wilf's papers are found to be illegible, having been chewed to pieces. Wow. So, I think that's a really cool ending for a book. I wonder if Netflix changed it, in part because seeing the three ghosts was pretty creepy. Honestly, they did a good job with that, I thought. But I also wonder if they changed it because it was a little less ambiguous. Even though you don't see him get killed, it's about to happen and who did it and how it happens. And then it kind of skews it towards like this was definitely supernatural. Whereas in the book, it's a little more open-ended. And I don't know that audiences always love that, at least in film. So I'm wondering if that might have been one choice.
I think that there have been studies shown that audiences don't like that.
I would have liked to have seen a mix of the two.
Yeah.
Like you could have done it where they're standing there and the other things are happening that were written in the book too. I would have liked to have seen kind of a mix because I like that. I like the newspaper article. I think it would have been a great ending part of the story that everything he's written down nobody could even read, ever found it because it wasn't eligible to read. It was what
illegible.
Illegible.
It was titular.
Can't speak this morning, but yeah. So I think it could have been cool if they would have done like a combo, ending with what they did, plus add a little bit extra in there too, like all these things that were happening to him, and he dies, and they don't know why because all the papers he spent the whole movie writing you couldn't read them.
But at the ending of the Netflix movie, they were basically, what is it, Henry, I think he says something, what was he said? It was going to be quick and painless, kind of what the father had said earlier in the movie about the mother. But who in the hell thinks that killing somebody with a knife is ever going to be quick?
I know,
painless. Like that's,
I know they have a
to
gun.
Me, that's,
why didn't they use the damn gun?
I mean, come on.
Well, and that's what they go into in the book and the movie was, Wilfred even questioning himself and the so-called conniving man that lives inside of him that, of course, after this horrific thing that he does, vacates. And so he doesn't have this conniving man anymore. And he's just left as a regular dumbass farmer who has committed this horrific crime is like, there were other ways. Of course, there were other ways. And Henry even said there were other ways. And yet the conniving man persisted that this was what we needed to do. And this is where it got us. So it's really kind of creepy and interesting. King always brings a lot of mental horror into the whole thing. Is like, what was this so-called conniving man? Was that paranormal? Probably not. But was it something that he only felt that way before this happened, and then afterward, all of a sudden, he's just himself, and he's like, what the hell did I do? Like, it's just kind of interesting, the way that this whole thing got started. And he was like, there were other ways. I mean, even killing her, there were other ways. It was, like you were saying, it was less violent or
poison
quicker,
in the wine. I mean, shit.
That's what I thought he was going to do as they're going through the process of him giving her more and more wine, and she ends up drinking like 2 bottles. I'm like, just put some fucking poison in the wine. Oh, she drank herself to death. Or, oh, we got some bad moonshine because we're shit kickers in the middle of nowhere. Like, I don't know. There were better ways for sure.
Agreed.
Well, you're right. It totally was.
So we're learning how to craft the perfect murder is what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the whole put something over her face. I mean, you didn't think she was gonna fight back? Give me a break. I don't. That was like the worst.
I think he was counting on her being so drunk that she was like out of it, and then slashing her throat. Because she didn't wake up when he put the thing on her face, and then he slices her throat, and it's supposed to be the end of it. But of course, it was going to cause a lot of blood no matter what,
exactly. Too. And I think the son had recommended, I mean, think about it. He had recommended that they just put a pillow over her face. And if she's shit-faced drunk and you put a pillow over her face, she would have probably blacked out way quicker.
That's what the son said in the book. He's like, Dad, why don't we just, like, put the pillow on her face? Oh, because she'll fight, and there'll be evidence, and it'll be too obvious. And so you slice her up and make blood go everywhere? Like, what is your problem? So yeah, the only farmer in the world that apparently hasn't slaughtered a pig, a cow, doesn't know how blood works. Like, come on. Yeah. So that was that. What would you guys rate the movie? Chrissy, what do you rate the movie?
Through to 5? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. Let's do 5.
I would say a 3.75. I mean, it was good. It was better than the average. I wouldn't say it was like fantastic. I thought it was a good story. The acting was really good. Makeup was really good. I think the story could have been a little bit better. I think they maybe, like Yardley said, maybe if they'd been I do agree with the son not having enough. I mean, shit. I hope my kids would need a little bit more convincing to kill me than what they showed on that movie. And then, like, the ending, like I said, if they could have just been a little bit closer to the book, I would have liked that. But I thought it was a good movie. I was captivated. I did have a hard time understanding him when he would talk. That kind of bugged me. Like, I was kind of like, what is he saying?
Such an accent. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. It could have been a little clearer. I mean, I know back then that's probably how they talked, and that's awesome, but we don't know. That was 100 years ago, and I really struggled with understanding what he was saying. So that would have been a little bit better. But regardless, I thought it was a really good movie, and I'm kind of pissed because I'm like, when did this movie come out? Like, why doesn't Netflix recommend these kinds of movies to me? I didn't even know this was in here. So it was definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, well, I agree. I'd give it a 3.75 as well. I think the thing that resonated the most with me in this movie is just the fact that had they just realized that things weren't working out, and had he just listened to his wife and just took that deal of, look, we sell it, split the money, get a divorce and keep it moving, it just turns out that they go through all of these things, and the thing that he didn't want to do at the beginning ended up being the thing that he had to, that he had to do. So I thought that was kind of cool. So it's definitely a solid movie. And as far as it showing up in your Netflix queue, what I've noticed in mine is if you watch a Stephen King movie, then they'll start having the recommendations of all of the other Stephen King flicks. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, and I didn't mind that it was all set basically either, at their house or just at, like one place in the town. I thought it was solid. I wasn't expecting much, so I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It definitely, me, it didn't, even though I had been reading the book at the same time, didn't go boom quite fast enough. So the first, it was really the third act where I was like, whoa, this is actually really, good. because it's a little bit of a slow build, but I like the mystery involved. Of course, horror is always good. Just in case you guys or any listeners are interested, another short story from the same book, Full Dark, No Stars, is called Good Marriage.
What is it
and
called?
I don't know a lot of Good Marriage.
Good Marriage? Okay.
Uh-huh.
You're sounding a little
actually
choppy and rough. FYI.
Oh, no. I had to update my Skype, so that's probably, it forced me to. It held me down and was like, update, bitch.
You sound better now.
But
You sound better now.
Okay, but I'm a little closer to the
Oh,
mic.
too soon.
Good Marriage is available. Hello?
Hello.
Hi. On Netflix. And it's another roundabout 90-minute Netflix original film. So if anyone is interested in watching A Good Marriage, it's a more contemporary story and probably has some connection to the Stephen King universe that we discussed. But go ahead and check that out and let us know. In the meantime, I think we're pretty much wrapped up for the day. Did anybody have any final thoughts?
No, you know what? I don't have any final thoughts, but I can talk about what we're going to talk about next week if you want to go ahead and dive in.
Oh, let's hear it.
I didn't put it in the show notes, but we had brought it up last week when we were gave that mention of Creep Show. So I figured, why don't we just watch Creep Show?
Oh yeah.
On the next episode. So everybody, dust off your DVDs or your VHS tapes and check out Creep Show, and we'll dive into that.
Thanks
Very
for the
nice.
ride, lady.
I'm excited because I have very limited experience with Creep Show, and I actually just bought it for the library, so I'll be able to rent it for free. So yay. Okay, so socials real quick. I'm just gonna do mine first because I wanted to mention Facebook. We have a cool little post going on right now where if you do it on mobile and type in the GIF bar the word Halloween and then the year that you were born, it shows you what your costume is supposed to be in a fun little GIF form. And it's been a real popular post the last couple of days, and it's been really fun to participate and everybody talking about the possibility of these being their costumes. So head over there and check that out if you're into fun little social media giggles. But I am Rebel Moni on Twitter, and I am Moni Bear on Instagram. And Miss Christy, socials and final thoughts?
No final thoughts, but I am at creepin_it on Twitter.
And I am at militant_marker on Twitter.
Very nice. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to you again. Well, you get two episodes this week, and we'll talk to you again with just one next week.
Outcome is on you. I've been living out there. Yeah, getting nice on this. Bar for bar, I'm a beast. So baby, pardon my tea and put some ice on it. Look at the lights on this. They getting hype in the back. You stay lit when I'm writing a track. I like it. I get invited to Mac, and every girl in the spot know that they coming with me. Hey yo, it's like that. And once you feeling the vibe, I get the feeling of high to start chasing your love, baby. It's like crack. With my cigar in the air, I get the mob in the hair. So get the law up in here before I strike back. Treat them one of a kind, and every one of them mine. So every one of them.